The Stoichea Vanguard that I've been waiting for months for is finally out. After making a video discussing how powerful this card was going to be, I have the opportunity to showcase to you guys my take on Claudine in the English meta of Cardfight Vanguard Overdress. What is up, Cardfighters, and welcome back to the Prime Vanguard channel. In today's video, I'll be showcasing you guys my take on Claudine after being introduced at the set 11 Clash of Heroes. Now, Claudine is a promo Vanguard. She recently came out in a promo set with the introduction of the new set, and I'm ready to showcase you guys the build that I've been working shopping for months. I have made a video on Claudine explaining all my theories and ideas on how you're going to build and approach this deck, and to be honest, my deck profile originally back then is pretty similar to the list I have now. There are a couple of tweaks and changes because of cards that I wasn't aware of that I did improve. Well, I did apply to this deck to improve it and make it better. And I must say that everything I said about Claudine back then stands true. This deck is aggressive, early game rush, super consistent, and it's very clear and it knows what it wants to do, and we love a Vanguard that is self-sufficient. But with that being said, let's finally head over to camera 2 and finally get this deck profile started. Alright, you guys, so to get this profile started off with, for Claudine, I am playing the Zorga Ride line. The Zorga Ride line just improves the card advantage of this deck tenfold. With how fast all the other decks are, depending if you're going first or second, you can increase your hand by +1 or +2, depending on which route you go. I definitely do think that right now, card advantage is extremely important just because of the current meta. I don't think that the Zorga Ride line, despite giving you that early game rush and the early game pressure, I think that having the card advantage is just more important because you want to be able to protect yourself against whatever your opponent's going to be able to throw at you at the beginning of their first grade 3 turn. And for the star of the show, we have 3 other copies of Flower Maiden Claudine. Now, Pinning Flower Maiden Claudine has 3 solid effects, and they go as Act Vanguard Circle once per turn, cost retire 3 rear guards, and until the end of the turn, this unit gets Continue Vanguard Circle, all of your planet tokens get power plus 5,000, and this unit gets Drive plus 1. Act Vanguard Circle once per turn, bind an order card from your drop, and call up to 2 planet tokens to rearguard circle. Auto Vanguard Circle. When this unit attacks, cost Soul Blast 1, choose one of your planet tokens, stand it, and that unit gets power plus 5,000 till end of turn for every 2 order cards with different card names in total in your drop and bind zone. So Claudine has an array of effects, but all of her effects actually synergize very well. Giving 5,000 power to all of your planet tokens turns all of them into relevant numbers, especially when supporting each other, and they're even better on Persona Ride turn. The +1 drive comes for a free cost. I mean, retiring 3 rear guards in this deck that generates an insane amount of planet tokens. It's not really a lot of work to get that skill off. Her restand ability is actually pretty powerful because over the time period of the game goes on longer and longer, you're going to get more cards in the bind zone, and we do play an array of different orders in this deck, about 10 that all do something to benefit Claudine's ability to maximize the full power you can give to the planet token. Now, because this deck does focus around planet tokens, we are going to have already a very early game rush strategy depending on our matchup, and if we want to play it slower or if we want to play it faster, we can do that. We also can choose to commit less cards from our hand because a lot of the cards in our deck will give us planet tokens for a very low cost, which means that we're not calling as many cards from our hand as we want, which is perfectly fine since Claudine is going to give that 5,000 power push anyway. We also have the benefit of the +1 drive as well, which means we're going to be able to add to our hand consistently, and because we're going to be using our orders to do different effects depending on what scenario we're in, we're going to have a lot of outs to many situations that we're going to play against. For my next grade 3, I play 1 copy of Roaming Prison Dragon. Now, Roaming Prison Dragon is a very powerful grade 3 that brings itself back when you activate an order, and we do play a lot of orders in this deck, so this card will consistently bring itself back, and then we can dictate on which effect we need depending on the situation. Now, the great thing about Roaming Prison Dragon is the fact that if you see in the early game, naturally it becomes a critical threat or a card you can push with, but the main reason why this card is in this deck is because it's a card that brings itself back when you activate an order, which means that this is a free callback for the effect of Claudine to retire it, to get your board set up to activate all of her effects, introduce new planet tokens. Because Claudine's effect restands the planet token only, there is no sort of weird shenanigans that we can do, like if you're playing Ground Fear or something, to restand the Roaming Prison Dragon to add extra threat to the attacking unit. Since we're restanding only our planet token, we really don't have any purpose for this card other than maybe in the early game to push, bring it back, and consistently retire it to activate Claudine's effect for free cost. Moving on to my grade 2s, I play 3 copies of Prod Pollen Raphilius. This is literally just a free planet token generator you can call in the early game to rush with. The main benefit of this card is the fact that when you drop this card, you get 2 planet tokens, so if you need to use this instead of for Claudine, you essentially got all of her effects off for a CB1, which means that you know, if you're in a bad situation, this is the only card you have that can bring you like in a better situation. It's a free Claudine. It gives you the tokens for Claudine's effect. It gives you the like everything you need to get going in the early or late game with Claudine to set up for whatever play you might need. For my next grade 2, I play 1 copy of Atrocious Moth Girl Maple. Now, Maple is a card that revives itself back from the drop zone when you go into grade 3. So naturally, this is another card that we can target with the effect of Claudine to be retired, because we're going to be able to Persona Ride later in the game, call this back out, set up a 3-card retire, and then use our other effects and choose our plant tokens. Or, you know, we can just use this card to rush in the early game. Just another body to spam back onto the board for Claudine's cost. And for my next grade 2, this is a tech piece personally. It is the most expendable option in the deck. It is 1 copy of Coffin Shooter. Now, Coffin Shooter has the ability where act drop zone once per turn, cost Soul Blast 1, bind an order card from your drop, and call this card to open rearguard circle. We use Coffin Shooter is just in case we can't use this, or if we can't bring this back, this card can revive itself back and make itself a target for Claudine's ability. It also does move in order into the bind zone, so if you want to play any orders that sort of revolve around that, you can absolutely do that. I just am personally trying this out right now as of 1, because in a situation where I can't bring this back, or I just don't have access to this because it's not in my hand for whatever reason, or I just don't have it in drop, then we have at least 1 card that we can bring back. It'll bind an order, which doesn't hurt Claudine because Claudine counts both in drop and bind, and then it's just a body to set up for your 3 retire. Moving on to grade 1s, I am playing 4 copies of Boru Mushrooms. Without a doubt, the best Claudine support, and honestly at this point, probably one of the best cards in Stoichea. This card will move itself into the soul, giving you the soul need to activate Claudine's restand ability. It gives you 2 plant tokens to use for whatever you might need for Claudine's effect to attack with, or give you 2 plant tokens to set up for the cost and retire of the Claudine skill to get the 5,000 power benefit as well as the +1 drive. Combining mushrooms with any of these cards works out. You give yourself a soul, you get 2 plant tokens, and then you have a soul to use with this. You should have a soul for this. You can also use this card to bring it out after you sacrifice Pratt Pollen, give yourself 2 plant tokens. This comes back, 3 retire. This comes back, 3 retire. The mushrooms just do everything that you want this deck to do. For my next grade 1, I'm playing 3 copies of Performing Petal Diantha. Every Stoichea deck I build, I will always play this card and at least try it out unless it doesn't work out. In this case, it does. Since our Vanguard does not cost CB and many of the other cards you see here do not cost Counterblast, we were able to bring back Diantha and use its effect to revive whatever it is that we might need. If we need mushrooms, we have it. Prop Pollen, we have it. The fact that our Vanguard does not cost CB again allows us to play these more Counterblast expensive cards to try out a variety of different strategies. And in this case, Diantha being a power piece that can be a strong booster and revive back cards you might need to reuse Claudine's ability for the retire effect makes her extremely helpful. Next, I play 4 copies of the Stoichea PG. And then for my last grade 1, and I got this idea off of Twitter, but it's actually been working out pretty well, I played 2 copies of Citrusan. Now, Citrusan has the following ability of auto when this unit is placed on rearguard circle. If you have a grade 0 rearguard, soul charge 1, choose one of your grade 0 rearguards and it gets power plus 5,000 until end of turn. So right now, I've actually been really enjoying this card. It is another soul charging card, which means that, again, Claudine has something to set up for its soul. It also gives 5,000 power to one of your token units, which means that the unit you're going to choose by Claudine's effect has another power benefit on top of it, as well as Claudine's power benefit. So it's got a lot of things going for it to make sure that that 4th attack really does count and it's as hard as it can hit. Because again, the base power of your plant tokens, they're only 5,000, which means you really need to put as much power as you can on these things to make them scary. Alright, next up we have orders. Now the orders here, I play a lot in this deck. I play about 8 and I'm all experimenting with them, but the ones I definitely do think are mandatory for this deck are the following. 1 copy of Prolific Orange. This is a grade 3 plant token generator. I just feel as though for 1 CB, getting 2 plant tokens as well as giving yourself a bind target for Claudine gives you 4 plant tokens for a counterblast of 1. 1 copy of Gradius Gradle. As far as all the Regalias pieces go, I think that this is the best one to have. It reactivates Persona Ride, and with this deck, you want as much power as you possibly can get, simply for the fact that, again, you are using plant tokens as your win condition, and they need as much power to push for game. 1 copy of Gather Upon Me, O Ye Wandering Souls. Now, we do play a lot of orders in this deck, so if you ever are stuck with a lot of them in your hand, you can use this card on your Claudine turn to get rid of another order for a card that you can have in the bind zone to target for 2 different cards, as well as give Claudine additional drive, which means you have 4 drive checks swinging at your opponent, which is pretty dangerous because, again, another way of getting more triggers to bump up that plant token. Nectar of Sensationalism. Now, if the game goes on longer and we have a lot of targets in our drop zone, which we will from the soul blasting as well as the retiring and the calling out and the guarding, this will give more power to your plant token as well as a critical benefit, which actually will make the plant token scary come the 4th attack later in the game. Now, these are the 4 orders I definitely do think that are mandatory for the deck. I think that if you're going to build Claudine, you should at least be playing all of these at one, and then everything else experimental. So the other orders that I would say are flexible and that I'm trying right now is 1 copy of In Search of an Ideal Far Away. Now, this order gives the effect to your plant token rearguard, where every single time it sees a unit attack, that unit acquires 5,000 power. So you're gonna have 2 attacks go off, which means that you can give that plant token 10,000 power. But the really best way to use this is to use this effect on the unit that's going to be boosting that plant token, because that means that that unit's going to see 4 attacks, which will add additional 20,000 power to the boosting plant token unit, which means that 25,000 power, or if you use any of these cards as boosters like Diantha or Citrus Sand, it becomes additional 28k booster or 33,000 power booster. So this card definitely does let you do some power plays on your plant token attacks, making that 4th attack again extremely scary. Next up, we have 1 copy of Mythiarch Habitat. While I do put this in more of like the staple region, this is just really good because it's a grade 1 order that lets you search your deck out for any of the pieces here in the deck. And I do think that all of these cards are solid. It gives you the extra body on board that you might need, like a Mushroom or Pride Pollen, to set up for your Claudine cost, or just get more bodies on the board and play, as well as being, since it's a grade 1 order, we can set up early and then rush with it as well. There's a lot of flexibility and there's a lot of things you can do with this card, which make it really solid. Next up, I have 1 copy of Spiritual Body Condensation. So this is a Soul Blast 1 revival card. You can essentially bring back any of the pieces you have in the drop zone again to set up for Claudine and her effect, or just get a heist like booster or other rearguard attacker to push your opponent with. And then I play 1 copy of In the Darkness, the Frozen Resentment. I really just play 1 of this because it does the exact same thing as this with no CB cost, but I actually do think that the Regurgitation from the Underworld might be better, because sniping 1 rearguard in the future of, looking in the future for this deck, I actually think it's going to be more of a big deal. But I do think that there are other orders you can try. I just like the fact that you get selected milling off of this card for key targets that you might need or want to put in the drop zone later in the game, as well as bring back 1 of these units to, again, set up the board for Claudine or for your aggro plays. So those are all 8 of my orders, and as for triggers go, my trigger lineup is kind of experimental right now. I haven't decided which one I like more. So I am playing 7 critical with 4 copies of Abyss Temptation, 3 copies of Melodia Palmera. I am playing 2 draws with 2 copies of Serene Maiden Lena. I am playing 2 fronts with 2 copies of Frenzied Heiress, 1 copy of the Stoichea OT, and then I am playing 4 copies of Elegy Pixie. Okay, so Claudine's trigger lineup is experimental, and you can talk about it. Now, a lot of people prefer to either go the 4-draw critical route, the front critical route, and then the OT and the heal are all up for debate. Here's my thing with my trigger lineup. I haven't decided what I like most. I think that, 4 generic heals is perfectly fine. I think that the Stoichea OT, yes, the red one does give you 5 attacks, and you can put everything onto that plant token to, again, hit harder and, potentially win the game. But I think that, again, the Stoichea OT, in my personal opinion, is one of the best OTs in the game. And as far as, between fronts and draws, the deck does feel like you need both. Yes, you have the early game setup with the ride line to draw more cards, you have triple drive, but sometimes you might be out advantaged. There are times where you might have to block with a lot. There are times you just might not see the key pieces you need. And Claudine cannot have a bad turn. She cannot afford one. Despite the consistency and despite the fact that she is free, she needs to get her triple drive. She needs to get her 5k bonus off. She needs to get her token set up. She needs to have a full board to make sure that her numbers are hitting maximum amounts, because, again, outside of the 4th attack from the plant token, she doesn't have anything else pushing against the opponent. So I definitely do see the argument for either one that you want to choose. I personally just think that I'm going to choose, play 2 and 2 right now, see which one I like more. Whichever one in game I wish for more, I will then obviously, in my updated deck profile, put that one as the max amount. And that concludes my deck profile, you guys, for pinning Flower Maiden Claudine. Now that I've actually have this deck in real life, I will say that everything I theorized about it prior in my last video, I was completely correct about. I enjoy every single thing going on for this deck. I actually think that Claudine is in a really solid spot right now. I think that it can potentially be a meta contender. It just comes down to the future support that we get in DBT 12, as well as what sort of order support we're going to have later in the future. Because she can take advantage of both orders as well as plant tokens, you have access to an early game rush strategy, late game push, and then your orders can essentially be used to fix whatever situation, or even, you know, used to handle any matchup that you want Claudine to be able to go against. I think that this is probably the most flexible Stoichea deck out of all the main decks that we have right now, just because of what Claudine does, and there's a lot of different routes you can play this deck going forward. But with that being said, card fighters, I will catch you later. Y'all have a blessed weekend. Peace.